My name is Michael Lukas, and I'm going to be reading from Peter Orner's new novel, Love and Shame and Love. And I was thinking about what to say when I was introducing Peter Orner, and you could read this back of the book, and you could say that he's been awarded 2 Pushcart Prizes and a Guggenheim Fellowship, and he's taught at the University of Montana and the Writers' Workshop at the University of Iowa. You could say that he's a professor at San Francisco State. I think there's a bunch of other awards and fellowships that just kind of slipped out of that bio because, they were sort of just pushed down as Guggenheims and Iowa came along. But I think that what I really want to say about this is, this book just really knocked my socks off. It's such a funny and heartbreaking and touching and stylistically and structurally experimental book. It made me rethink everything I've written in the past and everything I will write in the future. It made me rethink, what a chapter is and what a sentence is. And I'm not just saying that. It really did make me rethink what a chapter is and what a sentence is. And so when I chose what to read, I chose sections that would sort of illustrate the stylistic and structural experimentation that is going on here, and also a lot of the sort of emotional heft. Now I've lost my bookmark, which tells me which pages to read, but I think I can remember. All right. This section's called The Lake, and I'm not going to introduce anything because there's so many names that I don't want to get too complicated. But there's Alexander, who's Popper, and then there's Philip, who I believe is his dad. And then there's Seymour, who's his dad. And that's all I'm going to tell you. This is called The Lake. His father taught him to swim by tossing him off the fishing pier at Cary Avenue Beach. Cold drizzle. Sink or swim, kid. Popper was 4. Lake Michigan in his mouth, his ears up to his nose. The lake calm that day, and rain was falling slowly. So calm, he could concentrate completely on the cold. It was like being dropped into an icy bowl of cloudy soup, and it felt oddly right. The rush, the flailing around for breath itself. And his father on the pier shouting, "Pull, Alexander, pull the water." Fingers together, thumbs locked, and now pull. Lake Michigan is 307 miles long, 118 miles at its widest, a total area of 22,300 square miles. What's so great about the lake, Philip would say, and Leo and Popper would shout, "No salt." Ever since Popper had imagined God with a huge salt shaker, his grandfather Seymour's, the one in the shape of Uncle Sam, so enormous God needs to hold it with both hands as he scatters salt and ruins the world's oceans. Yet God left the Great Lakes pure because we in the Midwest are made of superior moral timber. The lake is always east. East is always the lake, and so is Jerusalem. At 10, he will swim to the sandbar off Cary Avenue Beach and stand on top of blue itself, his blue, Lake Michigan. 6th largest lake in the world, and young, very young. At 10,000 years, in geological terms, Lake Michigan is a punk. But that first time, bobbing upward, the sky upside down, his father vanished. Popper wasn't thinking about salt or size or even of water. Though water was there, was all there was and ever would be. Water in his own skin, the uproar in his ears, and the way the cold made him nothing. This section's called The East Window. Or the grandfather clock downstairs, how Philip would never forget to wind it. He'd pull the chains and set the hands with his finger, and it would start again. The relentlessness of that talking, no ticking, only talking. And for years it lulled him until, at no time he could pinpoint, it stopped being a comfort. This is all he knows. that one night it soothed him, and the next night and forever after, it didn't. His room, with the built-in white cabinets and the blue horseshoe wallpaper. Papa would lie there and listen to that talking all night long, trying to hold the moment of the silent pause between beats. Now he's certain he never slept an inch in all those years in that house, although of course he must have. He must have. It stands to reason. In order to wake up, you have to sleep. But he doesn't ever remember opening his eyes in that room, because they were always already open, staring out at the dark east window, waiting for the first light to come slantwise out from behind the lake. This next section is called Hollis Osgood. Miriam and Philip hired a houseman. Everyone else in Highland Park seemed to have a maid. Only the Poppers had a man. He put up the storm windows. He ran errands in Miriam's VW Bug. Hollis babysat. He cooked. He slept in a small room in the basement from Tuesday to Friday. Mondays and weekends, the Poppers were on their own. At cocktail parties, Hollis would wear a light blue shirt with ruffles and a black bow tie, and serve drinks with jokes and a plum that always left the guests shrilling. We simply love Hollis. Where on earth did you find him? A huge man. Nights he'd fall asleep in his basement chair by the ping pong table, reading by the white light of the television. He liked his novels thick and endless, Shogun and Clan of the Cave Bear, The Thorn Birds. Popper would crawl over the mountain of him and sneak the clicker, one of those prehistoric ones that sounded like a staple gun, out of his hand and lie on the carpet beside his chair and change the channels until the racket would wake Hollis up and he'd say, "Rhoda, turn it back to Johnny Carson before I count to 1.5. He smoked mentholated cools. He said that he had a daughter who lived in Cleveland, but the way he said the word, separating it out, Cleveland, it sounded to Popper as if he meant to say she was dead, or so far away from him that she might as well be. A Korean war vet. Korean emergency, Hollis called it. Precisely whose emergency, I'm still trying to decipher. He lost 2 fingers during the Battle of Chosin. One was shot off, he said. The other froze off. Xander, which do you think I'd rather go through again? Shot off. You already told me. When he gripped Popper's neck, there was always something missing. There was strength, yes, he was strong, but there was also emptiness, and not only because of his missing fingers. His stomach, solid as a refrigerator. Popper would make running starts from the back door, sprint into him, and bounce off. Hollis would shout, "Do it again and I'll call my lawyer on you." Philip was his lawyer. Philip was everyone's lawyer. Hollis Osgood was born in Alabama. After Korea, he moved to Chicago to look for work. Miriam found him in the Sun-Times classifieds. You were born into a family. You got found in the classifieds. You were born into a family. You got found in the classifieds. Philip stands in the kitchen, squeaky galoshes. Hollis, do you think this floor is mopped? Do I have to do these things myself? Do I have to come home from an endless day and mop this myself? In memory, Hollis is always taller than he actually was. He wasn't more than 5'7", about the same height as Philip. His stomach made him bigger. His stomach made him not only bigger, but also more substantial, more rooted to the floor. He remembers being worried for his father. Couldn't Hollis at any time have decided to knock his lawyer down with one lazy swing of his hand? Now I'm going to read one last section that I hope kind of ties all these things together. It's called The Hunters. There are Jewish hunters in northern Illinois, and the birds come out and party. Even Hollis, with his experience in the Korean emergency, wasn't a very good shot. They'd wear big yellow safety goggles and fondle their guns and trudged the frozen November fields. Philip had given the boys a choice: spend Sunday at Sunday school at their Reform temple, Lakeside Synagogue, learning Hindu, Buddhist, Islamic, and Cherokee, and periodically even Jewish precepts, or head up to the North Country to become a man. The four of them, a platoon of meandering unkillers, marching, silently marching. The land never rose in their eyes, but to call the prairie flat isn't to know it with your feet. To your feet, the November fields are fathomless. The more you walk, the more you never get anywhere. Above, the great Maine sky. Popper liked to put his fingers in the little bullet holders of his hunting coat and walk with his eyes closed. But those hunting fields were so stocked with game that even hunting with the Lhasa Apso, they couldn't avoid some action. Sir Edmund, in spite of his pampered backyard life, turned out to be pretty good at flushing birds. Even one of the old regulars at the hunt club, a one-eyed man named Kai, said of Sir Edmund, "Now that little hound has talent." Pheasants aren't very hard to shoot. First there's that hysterical nuthouse cackling, and then the running start, followed by a slow rise, like a fat, wide-bodied plane taking off. Occasionally, with their volley of shots, someone would hit a bird. Sir Edmund would retrieve the body. It was Popper's job to ferry the deceased, and he liked that part. He was a backward kangaroo, the pheasant against his back, warm, bleeding, heavy with the putty-like inertness of the newly murdered. Every third field or so, there was a rack and a row of nails. Birds would be hanging there like spent rags, their eyes as if pried open. Later, a man would come in a pickup truck and throw the birds into the bed of the truck and drive them to the lodge, where they'd be made into pheasant burgers, pheasant stew, pheasant casserole, and frozen pheasant to go. So he would have to give up his bleeding child and squeeze another little neck between the nails. And Philip would say, with near reverence, "These birds were raised to be killed, so we're only doing our part, playing our role in nature's great cycle of life and death and food on the table. Besides, if we don't shoot them, the next barbarian will. And then what? Isn't that right, Hollis?"